Hello, my name is Daniel. Today, we're reading Pedro the Puerto Rican Parrot by Beverly Jatwani and Sunita Chawdhary. So get comfy and I'll begin. Mr. Gonzalez was the owner of the local animal rescue centre. He liked to start his morning going through his paperwork while sipping a hot cup of coffee in peace and quiet. But on Saturday morning, things were anything but quiet. The noise seemed to be coming from the front door. So he grabbed his keys, opened the creaky door and gasped, "Squawk! Squawk! Squawk!" Right before his eyes was a noisy green parrot. It was obvious that the bird was hurt. "Don't worry, little one," said Mr. Gonzalez, picking it up. "You're safe now." Ding! Went the shop's doorbell as Dominic and his mum stepped in. "Buenos dias, Mr. Gonzalez," they said, but all they heard was "Squawk!" "Good morning," shouted Mr. Gonzalez to them. "How can I help you?" "Squawk!" "We brought some food for the shelter," Dominic's mum replied. "But where is that noise coming from?" "Ah, that would be Pedro," said Mr. Gonzalez, "a Puerto Rican parrot that was abandoned this morning. Its wing is badly injured." "Squawk!" Dominic's eyebrows shot up. "A Puerto Rican parrot? We just learned about them at school. They are some of the most endangered birds on our planet." He followed the noise and spotted the emerald green parrot. "Wow," he said. "Can we take him home, Mama, please?" His mum shook her head. "I'm sorry, Dominic, but the bird is badly injured." "Squawk!" "It will need constant care." "Squawk!" "We don't have a place for it and—" "Squawk!" "It's far too noisy." Dominic shed a tear with disappointment. "Maybe you can come and visit him," suggested Mr. Gonzalez. "We're always on the lookout for helpers here at the rescue centre." Dominic looked at his mum, who smiled and gave him a nod. "Yes!" cried Dominic. "I'd love to help." "Fantastic!" replied Mr. Gonzalez. "You'll be in charge of Pedro. You'll have to feed him every day and change his bandages once a week until his wing heals. But most of all," he added, "make sure you give him plenty of love." "Love?" asked Dominic. "Yes," replied Mr. Gonzalez with a knowing look. "Love will make the difference." He thanked Dominic and his mum for their donations. "See you tomorrow, Dominic," he said as they left. The following day, Dominic arrived at the centre, bright and early. Pedro's squawks could be heard from the car park. Dominic greeted Mr. Gonzalez, who looked like he was suffering from a bad headache, and headed towards the aviary. "Squawk! Squawk!" At the sight of Dominic, Pedro started squawking even louder, flapping his good wing. He looked very scared, and Dominic's attempts to get close were met by deafening noise and feathers flying about. He didn't know what to do, but he was sure of one thing. "I will not give up on you," he said, looking into Pedro's white-rimmed eyes. Suddenly, Mr. Gonzalez's words came back to him. "Love will make the difference." Holding some seeds in the palm of his hand, Dominic gently opened the cage. He whispered soothing words, and Pedro seemed to stop and listen. "Calm down, Pedro. I'm your friend." The bird hesitated at first, and then he got closer and started pecking at the seeds. Dominic gently stroked Pedro's feathers as he ate. As Pedro cooed and chirped, Dominic felt deliriously happy. After a week, Dominic changed Pedro's bandage, being careful not to make it too tight. Every day, Dominic fed Pedro and talked softly to him. He enjoyed telling Pedro about his day. Visiting his friend at the rescue centre was Dominic's favourite part of the day. He'd rush there after school and head straight to his cage. But on one rainy Monday afternoon, Dominic found Pedro's cage was empty. He ran to Mr. Gonzales. "Where is Pedro?" he asked in distress. "I'm sorry," Mr. Gonzales replied, "but he's been adopted. A lovely family came to pick him up this morning. They'll look after him until he's ready to be released back into the wild." Dominic's heart ached. He was so sad that he didn't even get a chance to say goodbye, he thought as he walked back home. But as soon as he opened his front door, shouting, "Mama, I'm home," he heard a familiar sound echoing through the air. "Squawk! Squawk! Squawk!" "Pedro!" exclaimed Dominic as he ran towards his best friend. "You did such an amazing job looking after him that we decided to bring him home," said his mum. "Thank you!" cried Dominic, filled with happiness. Dominic and Pedro became inseparable. Dominic let the bird perch on his bed and would fall asleep to Pedro's melodic whistling. A few days went by until it was time again for Dominic to change the bird's bandage. But before he could put on the new one, Pedro began to flap his wing. "Pedro," said Dominic happily, "you can fly again! Although this means that it's time for you to go home. I'd love to keep you, but you belong in the rainforest. I love you." The drive to the parrot recovery program in El Yunque National Forest was a long and quiet one. "I'm going to miss you, Pedro," sighed Dominic. "Take care of yourself. I will do everything I can to protect you and all the other Puerto Rican parrots." He petted the top of Pedro's head. "I love you, my friend." "I love you," mimicked the bird. Dominic's heart pounded. "You spoke!" Pedro spread his striking green and blue wings and soared into the sky. Dominic wiped a happy tear from his eye. That night, Dominic was restless and couldn't sleep. As he turned over in bed, his hand brushed against something on his pillow. It looked like a piece of a puzzle. "What? How?" he muttered. On the puzzle piece was the word love. Dominic held it tight. He somehow knew it was a gift from Pedro and that one day he would see his friend again. Thanks for listening. See you next time.